September 12th. Made a start for Cape Horn. Bay mare didn't go half the mile before coming down in 3 feet of porridge. Got it to the waist and all one side. Webster's doesn't contain the expression it brought forth. She knelt down from pure piety or pig-headedness. Thought she was going to be drowned. Another 3 miles and the other mare comes down stuck in a root. No harm done. Oldest staggers admit Beach, Forest and Princeton Road has never been in so deplorable a condition. Caused principally by heavy traffic or bullock teams, carting building material and stock traffic. Piece of road from Gardner's to Hall's turn-off very dangerous. Corduroy torn up and sunk down in patches. Approaches to the still and deep. Jim got stuck in one place. Thought it serious, but got out all right. Horseworth the other 2 put together. Got as far as Farrell's and camped. Light showers in the evening. Hard forest next morning. Fine all day.
I'm Anthony Sapelli, born in Beach Forest. Actually, I was born in front of the hospital. I didn't quite make it to hospital when I was born, but anyway. The rail was used for, carting spuds and sometimes Swedes and that.
But also to transport any other farm produce that the farmers might have produced, like milk, particularly milk, I suppose, to cheese factories and dairies. There used to be quite a few cheese factories and butter factories in the Otways because people couldn't transport their milk very large distances, but they seem to have gone too, which is rather a shame, I think.
All the roads were dirt. There was no metal roads, so they were only open during the summer and early autumn. And so farmers couldn't get any produce to Colac. So when the train opened up, the whole town boomed.
There had to be a lot of, earthworks, I suppose, to get through some areas or around some of the hills. There are certainly cuttings that on various properties around the place where people had to sort of really, dig a great deal, or blast or whatever it is they did, a great deal of the hillsides away. So it wasn't easy work.
People used to walk along the train track. It kept them out of the mud, so it was a walking track as well as a train track. Yeah, the trees were generally cut with axes and wedge and cross-cut saw. So it was a slow process and there was a lot of manual labour. And now it's all machinery. And what they fall in a day, probably they used to fall in a month. Where they were making big cuttings and that, they had horses with a plough and horses with a scoop. I've no idea how many worked there, but would have been a big crew. Long hours and 6 days a week at least. All the kids, their families were very basic. You know, there was no one rich. I mean, the Shire Secretary, he was perhaps highly paid, but it was only about half more than what the timber workers were getting. There's various pays they were getting a week, but you know, somewhere between 6 shillings and 8 shillings a week. You know, so there was no big difference, and there was no one really wealthy in the town. They were all struggling, you know. There was no luxuries, there was no electricity. A lot of places had no running water. You know, places in town, some of them had tanks, but a lot of places didn't have a tank. And, you know, it was pretty hard. I don't know how often, I mean, we were lucky we had a creek, and you could go and dip the water out of the creek and put it in the copper. So we had a bath every Sunday night, whether you needed it or not. But, you know, there was plenty of kids that, you know, went a fortnight, 3 weeks without a bath, so. But it depends where you were and that, but it was a good life, you know. I sort of seemed to get on well with everyone. No one ever hassled me, but I had older brothers, of course, that might help. When I was going to Beach Forest School, we used to walk down to the railway, and there was kids there that would look and say, hey, the guard's on this side, or the guard's on the other side, and we'd stand in the blackberries there, and when the train went past, we'd hop on the back of the guard's van and ride into the station, and used to go underneath the bridge going out to Labour's Hill, and I'd lean over the bridge as it went one way and I'd race over the other side as it come out and have a puff of steam and smoke there, but you know, it was all good fun. There was usually about 10 kids that done that. So we'd run from one side to the other. I know a couple of the braver kids used to climb up underneath a culvert and let it go over where the culvert went under the line. But I wasn't that game. The rail closed in 62 and the line was removed in 64. And when they were taking the stuff off just past Wimber, they were dragging the rails up to a heap. They started a fire. And so the last thing was a bushfire at Wimber going up towards McDevitt. And all the forestry blokes were away at a fire somewhere else. There wasn't a very big crew. And Stuart come and said, will you help us out for a while? So I worked there as a volunteer. They both got paid. But that was the last of the train that I had much to do with.
What a huge difference it must have made to have a railway line that, despite the fact that it took something like 7 hours to get from one end to the other, sometimes, would be so different from trying to fight your way along, you know, unmade roads, which is all they had then.